I'm not trying to say that they're going to lose their total control of college football, but I am trying to say that their grip is loosening. What is up, everybody? It is Jake with Master Football back at it again. Happy Monday. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to be up to date on everything college football, pro football, Madden, EA college football, NFL draft, anything related to American football, hit the red subscribe button. You will not be disappointed. Also the like button too. And if you're on X/Twitter, follow me. That fam is growing. Without further ado, let's get into the video. I will let you guys know that so far, other than Boise State football, which is off to a 2-3 start, not doing so great, I'll tell you that much. Horrible defense. Other than that, this is one of the coolest college football seasons I've noticed in a long time. One of the reasons why is because we have, how do I say this? A semblance of parity. A semblance of parity. We'll get to that later on in the video here. But for the most part, the last couple years of college football, particularly for the last 17 years of college football, we have noticed SEC dominance. They've always had good athletes, but particularly at the top producing national champions, they've been remarkably good at doing that going forward. Checking out this graphic, it's really easy to see why. Obviously coming off of the last two championships done by Georgia, and then Alabama, and then LSU. Now, we did have a weird period here where it was ACC, Big Ten, and then ACC, and then ACC. So they won two championships in between their Alabama. But for the most part, ever since the Florida Gators in 2006 won that national championship, 13 of the last 17 national championships have gone to the Southeastern Conference. Now, that dominance is due to many reasons. A lot of people say, oh, it's because we take it more seriously down here. They do. Again, you look at the amount of money they put towards academics versus what they put towards sports. It's very clear to see that there's a stronger emphasis on sports in the SEC. But I'm telling you here, I'm not trying to say that they're going to lose their total control of college football, but I am trying to say that their grip is loosening. One game that kind of showed that was this one right here. So this game just this last Saturday, the Georgia Bulldogs go and visit unranked 3-1 unranked Auburn Tigers at their stadium, Jordan-Hare Stadium. They got the crow, or they got the eagle flying in, War Eagle, even though it's a tiger, whatever the hell the situation is with that. But you see the fact that up until the fourth quarter, Georgia was losing to the Tigers. They came back. They won the game in the final minute there. You know, our dear friend Brock Bowers, big clutch catch, and Peyton Thorne threw a pick to end that game. But you think about this right now. The Auburn Tigers lost to Texas A&M. They lost at home to Georgia. They beat UMass and Samford, and they beat the Cal Bears, one of the most irrelevant teams in the Pac-12. They beat them by 4 on the road, and you're like, this is what Georgia was struggling with. You see the fact that Georgia struggling against this team right here. Again, still won, still made it out. Struggling against South Carolina at home, again, still made it out. But you're starting to ask some questions here. As a matter of fact, the media, maybe not the coaches, but the media is starting to ask some questions right now. Looking at these rankings here, obviously, there's no trend right here. You see the trend for the top 7 teams. Everything stays the same. But if you'll notice a couple things here, you see the fact that Florida State, 4 first place votes. Ohio State, 1 first place vote. Texas, 10 first place votes. Michigan, 12 first place votes. And Georgia, 35. So checking that out, you're like, okay, well, what the hell? 35, they're still the predominant college football leader in terms of first place votes. Everybody still thinks they're the best. That's 1 week. Again, after a win. What had happened last week, though, with the rankings? So 35 now, and last week it was 55. So 1 win. Again, you still went on the road. You still won in the SEC, the toughest conference in college football over the last couple of years. I would argue that the Pac-12 is a much tougher conference this year, but we'll get off that in a second here. You see the fact that Georgia had 55 first place votes the last time. So you're thinking there, you're like, well, they won, but they went down? Now think about this. The AP did that. The coaches were pretty loyal. So the coaches, 61 first place votes. And then when you go back to the last week, or to this week, you see the fact they have 59. So they lost 2 first place votes according to the coaches, and they lost 20 to the AP. Now, I think that part of that is because coaches are a little bit more simple in how they think. That's just how I believe. I also know that AP members are a little more flashy in how they think. So what the coaches probably thought is, listen, they won the last 2 national championships. They had a tough game on the road. They won. They ultimately, it doesn't matter. You have to beat the best. You want to beat the best. To be the best, you have to beat the best, and nobody's beat the best yet. They're still the top team. But the media is like, yeah, I know that that's an axiom, but I'm not really seeing it this year. And again, we've mentioned this before, that the fact that the SEC this season, from top to bottom, they don't seem like they're nearly as strong, and I am not the only one that has noticed. Here on SI.com, and again, this was a couple weeks ago, but at the very beginning here, it says the SEC has been unusually bad to start the season. The conference is 1-4 against top 25 so far this season, and 3 against Power 5 opponents, but what's worse than just losing the games? And again, they mentioned here the fact that the SEC, it kind of stinks so far. It said that how bad has it been? Again, remember, this is September 11th. So it says how unusually bad has it been? Mississippi's defeat of number 24 Tulane is the only thing saving the league from being winless against ranked opponents through 2 weeks, which last happened in 2004. The record against the top 25 is 1-4 so far, and the record against the Power 5 competition is 3-6. Now, since then, I do remember the fact that Missouri has beaten Kansas State. Missouri looks like they're off to a good start. They're going to get into league play. We'll see if they can continue that going forward. But Missouri beat Memphis, beat Kansas State, done a pretty good job so far. But you talk about, Texas, what they were able to do at Alabama. You talk about the fact that Florida looked completely disheveled at Utah, considering the fact that Utah is, they still don't really know who their quarterback is. There's just been a lot of games there where you're like, is the SEC really as good as you think they are? And you don't necessarily see it. Again, Alabama's loss to Texas at home was one of those ones. Also, in addition to the fact that it took them a lot longer than you wanted to beat South Florida, a middle of the road to lower end American team on the road. We're just wondering, is the SEC that top conference anymore? So I won't have a unique view on this because I'm ultimately going to say that no, the SEC is still the top because of the last couple of years of history and so on. I do think that in terms of who has the toughest road, they've said it straight up. Joel Klatt said it. He's like, USC has the toughest road to the national championship out of anybody. They have to play at Notre Dame. They have to play UW. They have to play at Oregon. They have and then again, they have to play whoever the conference championship is if they make it to that, because we don't even know if they do that. But we're looking at it right now. That looks like the USC has the toughest road into the national championship. Georgia, we've already lamented the fact that their schedule, again, part of that was because Oklahoma was going to be a non-conference opponent this year, but they decided to join, and so they're going to play next year, so they had to schedule a random team. Either way, we're looking at it here, and you see the fact that, remember here, this is the classes that are still playing right now. These are freshmen currently playing, and what do you see? We see SEC, will be SEC next year. Big Ten, SEC, Miami, USC, Oregon, SEC, Clemson, Notre Dame, SEC, Penn State, SEC. So they're still doing just fine when it comes to recruiting. But there's been one thing that I would argue has drastically cut into the ability for the SEC to dominate. Remember here, most of these players are in the southeastern regions, and a lot of the SEC teams are in the southeast. You would argue Missouri is really a southeastern team, whatever. Either way, but they stay close to where they recruit from, or they stay close to where they live at is where they get recruited to. But there's one vehicle that has drastically cut into their ability to hoard players, and it's the transfer portal. Now, these are the top transfer portal teams here. And the interesting thing about this, so check this out. There's still lots of SEC teams on here. Check this out. We got LSU, Ole Miss, Auburn, Oklahoma eventually will be an SEC team, Arkansas, and so Kentucky. But remember here, I didn't say Alabama. I didn't say Georgia. Okay, you also don't see Ohio State on there. You see USC on there. You see Colorado on there. But for the most part, most of the teams that have been the Blue Bloods the last couple of years, they typically don't dominate the transfer portal rankings. Now, this is rankings. You can still bring in a good player here or there. But for the most part, what happens is the recruits all go to these schools, and then eventually a lot of the recruits transfer to the other smaller schools where they can play. Colorado is a weird exception here. The USC, Auburn, Florida State, Miami, Oklahoma, Oregon, again, still top teams, but not necessarily those top blue blood national championship contenders on a year-to-year basis. LSU, I believe, will eventually be there, but they're using the transfer portal in Brian Kelly's second year to try and address that. Remember there, I don't think it's the fact that the SEC is going to be bad going forward, but I do think that the transfer portal will prevent the SEC from hoarding and having. I remember a couple of years ago when Deshaun Hand played at Alabama, and Deshaun Hand came off the bench. He was a 5-star defensive lineman. Now, anywhere else in the country, he probably would have started, but with Alabama, he can do that. It's harder and harder to hoard players, which is why what Georgia did these last 2 years has been amazing, because they just had such a hard time keeping and retaining that much talent who wasn't playing. Jermaine Johnson was also on that team, transferred to Florida State, ultimately went in the first round still. But think about that. Even him leaving, that if he would have stayed because of lack of ability to leave because of the transfer portal, Georgia would have been that much better. So again, my consensus is this. The SEC is still going to maintain their dominance towards the top of college football, I believe, for the future. But, like we mentioned before, 13 of the last 17 national championships have gone to the SEC. I think they'll still remain dominant. But like I said, the next couple 17 years, it could be 9 out of 17, could be 8 out of 17, could be 10 out of 17. What we're going to see is the transfer portal has really enabled a lot of those top tier teams. Unfortunately, it's made it harder and harder to maintain some of those 5-star guys who are second string, those 4-star guys who have to sit for 3 years. It's harder and harder to do that going forward. So again, the SEC will still remain dominant. We're seeing in 2023 so far, we're seeing some of the cracks in that foundation. They'll still be good. I think Georgia's still going to walk to 12-0. But regardless, we're starting to see they still have the grip of the best conference in college football, but it's slowly starting to lose it a little bit. They won't lose it for a long time, but the transfer portal is making it go quicker. All right, guys, get in the comments right now. What do you think about that perspective? Again, I think the transfer portal has prevented those top teams from hoarding talent. Remember, you can't have a 5-star guy who will sit for 3 seasons. He knows, he's like, I'm a 5-star, I'm going to go play somewhere. But you guys, get in the comments and let me know what you guys think. And remember, here, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Do all that stuff. I really appreciate it. So for me, guys, I'll see you guys later. I am out.